because he legitimizes conspiracy. So we can talk conspiracy all day long. If somebody's just sitting at home, never done a ding dang thing, who cares? Then they come across as a nutbag. But I'm going to read to you what he's done, and then you're going to maybe ask yourself, maybe it's really not a conspiracy. Maybe it's called the truth, in my opinion. You can see I've got a bias towards the topic already. So back in 2017, and excuse me for reading this, but it's a little long. I'm going to read fast, okay? Mark Jaycox said, "That's not John Lear, it's an imposter." And this was John's reply. This is 3 years ago. "Oh, Mark, you got me. I am the fake John Lear. The real John Lear stands tall, a man among men." I don't want to get emotional. I'm already getting emotional. Hold on a second. What? Handsome, close-cropped white hair. A lady killer he is, even packing more weight than he should at 74. Well-read, well-spoken, a diplomat's diplomat. World traveler, comfortable sipping tea in a, how do you say that? Caravansier?
Caravanserai.
In Kandahar, as sipping coffee, Mazbat Sukran? Am I saying that right? Downtown saunas. Only if you look carefully in the left lapel of his dinner jacket can you see the International Order of the Knight's Grand Cross of the Star of Asia. His tanned face would blush if you brought it to his attention. He can expound on the trials and tribulations of Omega navigation, simplify the mechanics of celestial navigation, and detail GPS to the unwashed. An inveterate storyteller, he will have you rolling in the aisles with his irreverent stories of flying for the CIA in Laos, getting shot down but making it to friendly territory. His cattle run flying cows from, where was that, Khartoum? Yep, across the Red Sea to feed the troops in Yemen, running guns from Greece to South Africa, and his part in the, quote, October surprise. He would have you believe that he's the only pilot to have flown as captain. Now listen to this, okay? On the same day, in the same Boeing 707, a revenue flight for both El Al, Israel's national airline, and Air Sinai, one of Egypt's passenger airlines, and that he was close friends with Salim bin Laden, Osama's half-brother, when he lived in Cairo. He claims to have tried to save Prince Sultan, the idiot, not the defense minister, it was his son, and Salim bin Laden, their $250 million investment in the Lear fan, which ended up exploding in a pressure tank in a hangar in Reno, distributing composite parts to every room, bathroom, laboratory, hallway, lobby, and or broom closet in the hangar. He holds more Federal Aviation Administration issued airman certificates than any other airman. He was type rated in 23 aircraft and has flown over 100 different aircraft in over 50 different countries. I'm almost done. Retired for 16 years now, I am sure the real John Lear would not be posting on Facebook about some silly secret base in the Nevada test site. I would doubt he would even have a computer. I would imagine John Lear sipping an expensive Sauvignon Blanc in the afternoon sun while waiting for his 16-year-old grandson to finish his daily class in high school, come to his grandpa to take him out to the desert to shoot automatic weapons and toss a few grenades. I would imagine John Lear to be susceptible to the bribes of Cohiba Esplanados, if I'm saying that right, and Cavassier, if only he would reveal the secrets of the universe. No, Mark, I'm not the real John Lear. I'm an imposter who wishes he could shine John Lear's shoes, if I could ever find him. And that's who's right here. So, are you okay?
That handkerchief.
Yeah. See, I was going to cry. Now he's going to cry. So, some of you know this about me, that I have this thing about aliens. And oh my God, because I'm 61, how much shit I have taken because of this. And I play it down even as much, I believe it even more than what I say. I've had contact, I've never said that publicly before. I've had lifelong contact, actually. So this guy is our hero in many ways, because I'm thinking, if he's flown in the air and all that, and he can do all this, and he says they're aliens, what the hell is going to tell him no? I want to know who comes close to those credentials that can tell me no. If you come close to it, I'll believe you. I'm open-minded, but I know from my experience what I've seen. And so you're gonna be talking a long time to even come close to convincing me that your opinion on this matter, trumps his. Okay. So, he's at a challenging time in his life right now. He's on a bridge. He's on the bridge between point A and point B. And I'm the lucky son of a gun, me and Bob, to have him at our house right now for a very short time. And, he likes simple things. He mentions Cavassier. I make this like fake hamburger helper that Bob likes. This is what John likes. And once he gets his own place, I will be bringing him hamburger helper and bratwurst from the German restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I want to thank you very much for coming on. And this has nothing to do with anything too much, but I have a lot of friends that are astrologers. So when is your birthday? What sign are you?
December 4th, 42, Sagittarius.
You're Sagittarius? Yeah, because the Sagittarians are the travelers, right? That would make sense. I would want to know what your rising sign is, but there's no way you would know that, right?
My what?
Rising sign?
No.
Okay. No, that's all right. That's relevant, I guess. What would you like to say? Is there anything that, well, first of all, I asked him earlier, is Bob Lazar alive? And he is still alive. If you don't know who he is, go Google that later. We're not going to take time into that. And you still stay in contact with him, correct?
Yep.
Yep. And he's doing well and thriving.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I keep forgetting your name.
My name is Susan.
Susan.
Yeah, he's a ball buster.
He's
But
poking the
that's
bear.
all right. Anyways.
Bob is, was always a good friend, and I've known him, let's see, 89, so 99, 09, over 30 years. And, it is the smartest guy I ever met. And just really down to earth, and really a great guy to know. Now, he used to live in Las Vegas, and then he moved to Albuquerque. And started his business there, which is United Nuclear Scientific, and you can find that on the web. And he moved from there to Lanesburg, Michigan, and then just a year ago to Klamath Falls, Oregon.
Yeah.
And he has this scientific business. He distributes supplies, scientific supplies to universities all around the world.
Hold on, excuse me 1 second, John. Somebody sent me a message saying the screen is sideways, the sound is awful. So,
I can turn it
yeah,
around
turn
if
it
you
around,
want.
please. And we'll see if that helps. And hopefully the sound, John does not have a real loud voice, so hopefully you can hear. But send me a message, whoever's listening, mainly Gail, who's sending me the thing. Hopefully the volume's improving.
I'll speak up.
Okay, try to speak up. One of the things I wanted to ask, you went to high school in Geneva?
Did I go to high school in Geneva? I went to several schools in Geneva. And yes, high school. I went to the International School in Geneva, and 2 boarding schools. One was called CPR, and the other was called the Rose. And so, yes, in Geneva.
And what kind of a student were you?
Pardon?
What kind of a student were you?
D to F. Every once in a while, a C, but not very often.
Were you a troublemaker?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I excelled in trouble.
Okay, that's good. All right. And, okay, I had a feeling. I thought it was going to be one extreme or the other, and I would have guessed that was the case. So, do you miss flying at all?
Not one bit, it's a very intensive business, and I was an instructor. I was a check airman. I was a check airman for the North Atlantic. I taught captains how to fly the North Atlantic and how all the important stuff that went on, and there's a lot of records to keep. I don't miss it, even at the end, before they started asking all the 9/11 questions, and things that you had to do for 9/11. It was difficult even then. So I was glad when I retired. That was that.
So when you first started that career, you didn't have an idea, did you? You didn't have the goal of saying, I wanna be an extraordinary pilot. And, was that your goal? Did you have that?
I just wanted to be a pilot, and that was my basic problems with my father is he couldn't imagine anybody just wanting to be a pilot. He said, you could be a doctor or a lawyer, and you can own your own airplane. I don't want to own an airplane, I want to fly the airplane. He said, well, it's just like a bus driver. And so, what's the matter with being a bus driver?
Right.
And I wanted something, big and glorious. And so, until the day he died, he was against me being a pilot. He died in, let's see, 1978, so I worked for him several times, but we never got along. At one time, he supposedly was a good pilot, but he wasn't a good pilot anytime I flew him. So,
But he saw you be successful in your career.
Yeah.
And he just didn't feel like he wanted to give you any credit for it.
no. I remember going up to his house in Purdy, and I had my crew with me, and we just brought a 707 in there with a load of passengers and stuff, and so he said in front of everybody, and he's always holding his study, so what'd you fly in here, John? I said a 707. Oh, 707, that's the one with 3 engines, right? Of course, we all laughed. Everybody knows the one with 4 engines, but he just couldn't grasp, how this idiot son of his could be flying a 4-engine airliner, 4-engine jet airliner.
Well, isn't life ironic, right? Life is ironic all day long, and we can look at it as bitter, or we can look at it with a sense of humor. I choose usually a sense of humor. Like, it's awesome that the guy who would quote unquote, but he didn't really invent the Lear jet, and you clarified me on that before, has this extraordinary son, and yet he still doesn't see it. There's the irony of life. It just happens all the time in so many people's lives.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk too much about him and the Lear jet, but specifically, he did not invent it per se. Well, how would you say?
He put together the idea for a business jet. In 1959, he made a lecture to the Society of Automotive Engineers in Wichita, saying that what you ought to be thinking about is building a light twin jet aircraft instead of going propellers. You have the DC-8 coming out, the 707 coming out, the Convair 880. You should be concentrating on jet airplanes. That was in 1959, and that's when he started trying to form his own company, which was originally the Swiss American Aviation Corporation, SSA 23, and he was we were all living in Switzerland, and he thought that Swiss engineers, Swiss talent, Swiss available fabric materials, and none of that proved to be true. So he had to pick up the whole company, everything, and move it, and he moved to Wichita where there was overflowing with engineers. He had his pick of the brightest and the best engineers. And he put together the company, Learjet. The first flight was October 7th, 1963, which happened to be 4 days after my first daughter's birthday, Moya. And it was that, that was a month after. Anyway, first flight, and a year later they had sold up to 20 or 30, and it just took off.
Yeah.
And but no, he had no information, no education of airfoils or design information. All he knew is he wanted an airplane with 2 jets. And the jets was the CJ610 General Electric, which was available, and all the rest of the stuff was just process and methods put together by the engineers that he hired.
Yeah, and I'm not, I just wanna wrap that part up. Cause we had talked before, a couple of days ago on this. What I found striking about your father was, it wasn't a success story the whole time. He created these things, some of the planes crashed, different things happened, but he never gave up. He just kept on going.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about tenacity in a big way. So for that, I appreciate his life story, which is a fascinating life story for people that wanna delve deeper on that. It is.
Yeah, so, he kept trying to capitalize on his, on the Lear jet, and he started what was called then the Model 40, and in 1967 or 68, he just ran completely out of money. All the millions he had made, trying to make new stuff and better stuff, and he had to sell, the company to Charlie Gates Aviation, or Gates Rubber Corporation, and they had recommended, the board of directors had recommended, buy some kind of a aviation company to get into now. And so they shopped around, they found out Lear was for sale, and they bought it. To make a long story short, they paid $25 million for my dad's company, which was already $25 million in debt. So it cost them $50 million to get into the aviation business. And then he took that money and he moved to Reno, and trying to climb on some new thing, and the new thing then was pollutants, automotive pollutants. And he thought that what they needed is a better automotive propulsive engine, which would naturally be the steam engine. Unfortunately for Dad, if he'd have just watched any of the movies or read any of the stories about Howard Hughes, he would find out that Howard Hughes in 1932 commissioned Caltech to build him a steam car. And when they did their 2-year study and brought him the steam car, Howard Hughes, and this is even the movie of Howard Hughes, they said, where's my steam car? And he said, well, that's it, Mr. Hughes, that's your steam car right there. And he said, well, I don't understand, where's the steam turbine? And the vapor portion of the steam turbine, I'm trying to remember what the term was, but they said, well, the whole thing, everything's, the vapor goes through the fenders and the doorways and everything. And he says, well, here's why it won't work. And he took a hammer and threw it against the car, and of course it broke these little tiny tubes, and all the steam came out. And that's why the steam engine doesn't work, because the horsepower of a steam engine is dependent on the capacity to create steam back to water after it's been used.
Okay.
And he kept he found this out gradually as he wasted $7 million of my inheritance. And he got through, I guess, to the 5th year, it became apparent that what it was required, and so he went to a steam bus, and he said, well, it's more efficient. It wasn't more efficient. What it had is the top of the bus they could use for the vapor control, and even that didn't work. There was, at those times, California was interested in the 3 emissions, controlling all the emissions, nice time, and whatever the other 2 were, and it could never meet all 3. It could meet 1 at any time, but not on all 3. So he went bankrupt, or they shut the company down, didn't go bankrupt in 1976, and about that time he, one of the engineers in the back room had drawn a little airplane, a pusher, what they call, with the filler in the back, and he thought that was pretty interesting, so he put all his time and money on building what was called the Lear van, and he was putting all his money in the fact that this Lear van was made out of composite material, which is a blend of fiberglass, carbon epoxies, and that kind of stuff to make it lighter. He was under the false impression that carbon fiber was lighter and stronger than aluminum. And so he goes on building this stuff. 1978, he passed away. And the alleged story told by the nurse who was with him when he passed away of leukemia in San Francisco hospital, the last thing he said was, "Finish it, Mommy." So that story went around the world about, you know, a million times, "Finish it, Mommy." And on that basis, they, the company that they formed, Lear Corporation, got $30 million from Oppenheimer, and then they ran through that, and then they got another $125 million from the British government on the basis that they would build this airplane in Ireland so that the people that were fighting there would have something to do other than kill each other.
Right.
And then towards the end, he got Prince Sultan, the nephew, not the prime minister, and Osama bin Laden, who was Osama's half-brother, who I knew very well. I spent 2 years in Geneva, and Solomon was a good friend of mine, and he came up and said, "Hey John, you know, Prince Sultan and I are thinking about putting $250 million in the Lear fan. What do you think?" I said, "Well, here's why it won't work," and I gave him the reason. He said, "Well, would you talk to Prince Sultan about it?" And I said, "Sure." So we got on the phone. We're in his elaborate apartment, Solomon's elaborate apartment in Geneva. I called Prince Sultan, who lived in Colorado City, and started asking me some questions and this and that. And then at the very end, after I had all his questions, he said, "Yes, but you're not an engineer." And I said, "No, I'm not an engineer, but I do know a little bit about the airplane and why it won't work. But we put the money in anyway." So that was really made me feel good when the whole total cost of the airplane, the investors, when they filed bankruptcy, was I think $450 million, which was, you know, $250 million of Solomon's and Prince Sultan, and they deserved to lose that money.
Because you told them, you gave them the warning ahead of time.
Yeah, gave them the warning they had time.
And as just an aside, well, because maybe some people know, my first husband did build carbon fiber racing boats, and it's woven in a certain pattern, and then it is stronger than aluminum. And his own father also built aluminum racing boats, saying, same argument. This is like just a few years after this happened. This is like where our story kind of has a weird similarity. And the aluminum boat was winning, but the carbon fibers went faster. But they had to be woven in a certain pattern so that they could, you know, the shear was not affecting the boat. Anyways, and
he passed away in 1978, and a year after that, there was a family get-together, Thanksgiving get-together up in Reno, and we all got together, and, oh no, it was before he died, because it was a year before he died. And he took me out into the hangar to see this Lear fan, and I looked it over and everything came back, and I didn't want to create any problems, so I didn't ask any pointed questions.
Right.
And so Mom comes in, and she says, "How come you're not asking your dad any questions about the Lear fan?" I said, "Because it's a bust, and it always will be a bust." Mm-hmm. "Oh, you don't know, it's always the son that's supposed to be having new stuff, and now it's the father who's has the new stuff, and you don't agree with it, you know." So that argument went on for, you know, let's see, many years. But when he passed away, she rewrote his will to give her sister my portion, her sister and my children split up my portion of his, what he was going to leave me. And then after that,
she was tough.
What?
That's a tough mother. That's a very tough mother.
Yeah, well, you know, it's because you're so stupid and you don't get it, you know. So the only thing I can say in her, in the final words, is one time after it all came crashing down and they owed $450 million in debt, the largest single aviation disaster in history, one time, and we were walking down this hallway at her house, and she said, "Well, I guess you were right." Now, it was just that one time, but I heard it. She
You
said
heard it. And you just hang on to that. Oh my goodness. All right, so we're gonna fast forward. I'm gonna answer the questions maybe a little quicker. So did you go looking to work for the CIA, or did they come to you?
I didn't even know I was working for them for a year. When I was working for them, I was flying airplanes I got a job flying airplanes to Vietnam. And the airplane was a Ford Air Control Cessna 02A. And they were rigged with guns and rockets and stuff. And they were two-place, and they had all kinds of fancy radio equipment and everything. And we would pick them up in Wichita and brand new, and fly them to San Francisco, and then to Honolulu. Big, twin-engine airplane, prop. That was 18 hours, and that was a long flight. In those days, the Air Force didn't mind giving out dextrine, benzotrine, kind of. So after you fly your 12 hours, you take a pill, and you'd feel like flying the next 12 hours. And then when you got to where you were going, they gave you the thing that made you sleep. And anyway, they turned out years later, that was no good.
Yeah,
Right?
that was probably not a good plan.
But we get to Honolulu, and then from there to Midway Island, refuel there, then to Wake Island, refuel there, then to Guam, refuel there, then to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, refuel there, and then in country. And I did 5 years of those flights. I took 10 airplanes over, and it was one of the best flying jobs I ever had, because it would just fly all day long.
Oh, you wouldn't get tired of it?
And drink all day long.
Oh, yeah, you were happy doing that.
Yeah, and then flying at places, or after we got to where we're going, in those days, all the pilots of different airplanes got together, who were ferrying these airplanes to Vietnam, and you'd play liar's dice and drink vodka tonics, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that.
And then the day came when somebody, or somehow you found out you were working for the CIA.
Yeah, the day came when we were doing something, and I noticed when we got to Nha Trang, where we delivered, and someone was giving me, all I had was just a name badge, and I had long hair, which you weren't supposed to have in those days. I mean, Air Force, and I was walking to the officers club, and some major Air Force major said, "Mister, where's your hat?" And I turned toward him, and he saw my badge, which meant I was something. And so later I asked, and he just stopped immediately. So later I said, "What was that all about?" He said, "Come on, John, we're all working for the CIA. Everybody knows that. This is a CIA town." And then, let's see, that was in '74.
And then did you say, "No, I didn't know that," or did you
I
just,
didn't.
you kept your mouth shut?
No.
He says that, and then did you just
Yeah.
think to yourself,
Yeah, I just, okay. So then I went up to Laos. Oh no, I was flying in Cambodia. I was director of flight operations for a American airline that was called Thailand Airlines, and we flew in Cambodia. We flew the public from Phnom Penh up to Battambang to buy rice, because the Chinese had cornered the rice market, and it was cheaper to buy an airplane ticket up to Battambang and bring it back than it was to buy it in
wow.
Phnom Penh. And then when I was there flying for them, and that was not CIA, somebody said, "Hey, why don't you go up to Laos? You can make at least 3 times as much money up there." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't want to get shot through the seat there." And they said, "Oh, no, they put all their handbooks and stuff. You sit on your handbooks and stuff, and those small arms fire won't go through those." So
Is that literally what you did? You sat on books to
Yeah.
keep the bullets from hitting you?
Yeah. So I got interviewed by, at that time, that company was owned by Continental Airlines. They sent somebody into Phnom Penh to interview me, and got hired, and went up to Laos with my wife then, Marilee, and we lived there for a year, and I got shot down once, which is usually about all you get shot down with, but I made it into friendly territory, and I have a little gold necklace that I picked one of the bullets out of the airplane when we got out of the ground, and I got it mounted around there, but haven't seen that in a while.
So you got shot down from what height?
600 feet.
And then what happened? So you knew you were going down, obviously.
Yeah, we were just delivering packets of ammo or packets of munitions out of the back of this Twin Otter. And look, it held 6 packets, and you'd fly over to where you were supposed to, the guys that you were supposed to drop to, and you'd press a button, and they'd ring a big bell in the back, and they'd push the button,
Right.
and then it'd come down at what they call a G7 parachute, and it opens and hit the ground, and it would be okay. So apparently rolling into this, and I spent many years with Dave Kuba, who was the captain on this, and I said, didn't you hear him tell you to turn immediately left after we dropped because of the enemy? He said, no, I never heard that. But he kept going on, and that's the whole us down. So anyway, we started heading towards, what first thing that happened is we heard the kicker in the back was yelling, hey cop, and we looked back, and there's this whole mist of fuel in the back. And what happened is they had shot out the fuel delivery system in the right wing, and it was coming out, and because of the airflow in the back of this Twin Otter, it was flowing back into the thing, and of course now we're filled up with fuel. And our saving grace is there was an airplane that flew overhead about 20,000 feet called it was moonbeam at night, and I can't remember the daytime. Oh, Cricket, and you go Cricket, Papa Hill Golf, we just been hit. We're heading south to Lima 169. We'll keep you advised. So get ready to send that message. But I'm sitting there surrounded with all these gas fumes, and I know that if there's one little spark,
That's right.
it will be the end.
That's right.
And so I had to make the decision, and I think I cupped it as best I can, and like Cricket, this is Papa Hotel Golf, but anyway, we didn't blow up, and we went south and landed in the place, got repaired, and we were flying the next day. So the war ended in 1973, and I came back and started flying for Clay Lacy and Lear jets, and then heard about a job flying a 707, which I thought was pretty neat because it's a bigger airplane. And I went up to Seattle with the owner. He had just bought 6 of them from Brandon Airline. They were the Boeing 707 of the United Airlines. And going up there, the chief pilot was flying. I said, you guys looking for any pilots? He said, we're looking for co-pilots, but we don't need a captain. I said, oh, okay, great, could I go through? And the reason I wanted to go through the training is it takes about 6 to 8 weeks, because there's systems training, and then there's this training, and then there's that training. There's no end to the training that you go through, and I just wanted to get in the envelope, in the schooling,
Right.
so I'd have that in my background. So got through the training in 6 weeks, and then we go, there's 2 things you do. You take a simulator ride in an identical airline, and then you take a real airplane ride to see what you can actually do. And so I took the simulator ride and got by that, and I went in and talked to Chief Pilot. I said, if I pay a little extra, could I get a rating? I'm just taking a co-pilot ride, but can I pay the little extra that it would take to give me the captain? I said, yeah, sure. So we worked it out so that when I took the co-pilot drive, the VFD inspector gave me a captain's drive, and the night after I took my check ride, I got a call from the chief pilot and said, John, it turns out we're gonna need a captain, would you like to fly for us?
Perfect.
And so that was really,
That's good.
really interesting. I remember soon as we get somebody that's qualified, more qualified than you, you're out. I said, okay.
Well, wasn't that nice?
But that guy never showed up, you know.
No. All right.
I flew for, that was, Air Club International and Aero America. And then I went over to, I heard they were looking for 707 captains in Lebanon, Beirut, but one of the world's largest cargo airlines called TMA. And I went over there and flew for a couple of years there. And came back and, let's see, what about it was 1977. And then I got wind of a job flying out of Budapest, flying arms and ammunition down to Somalia. And I did that for a while.
That sounds high risk.
What?
That sounds high risk.
It was, and it was interesting. It was an interesting job, and met a lot of people. But came back and started working for Nevada Airlines, flying DC-3s from Las Vegas to the Canyon, and then wound up at flying the Hilton hotels. They had bought a Lear jet, and they wanted John Lear to fly it. So I acquiesced, got the thing, and I was a horrible corporate pilot, just horrible. I could never be on time. I didn't always have the copy filled. The co-pilot did that, you know. I never did anything on time or right. And so one day we were down, we took a group down to Venezuela, and I can't remember what we were doing down there, but anyway, when we got out of the airplane, the casino manager who was in charge of this particular expedition down there, he started big wheeling, and he says, now you guys can have 4 days all to yourself. This is treated like a vacation, you know, no problems here. You're gonna be out for 4 days, and da-da-da-da-da. And he's big wheeling in front of other executives, showing what a magnanimous thing is.
Right.
So anyway, he leaves, and I told Tom, the co-pilot, I've always wanted to see Angel Falls, and so I went and got on an airline, takes you down to the city where you take another airline, and they fly around you in the daytime to see the Angel Falls, discovered by Jimmy Angel. And I came back, and of course, the whole thing took about 2 or 3 days. And when I got back, Jimmy said, you know, they needed you. They wanted you to go over to this island. And I said, that figures, you know. So the story was then that, you know, John Lear couldn't show up on time for this flight. And one thing after another, Baron Hilton, who was the owner, and it was really a nice guy, said, John, we decided to make some changes here. So that was okay with me. And I went to work for another airline over Egypt, and I was there for 2 years. And that's where, in the end of 1978 is when Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords. And the Camp David Accords, where each country would agree to certain conditions, but one of them was that they would fly into the other country 4 times a week to prove that they were friends. And so you could find no problem flying El Al, Egypt's airline, flying into Cairo, but you could not find an Egyptian who would dare fly into Israel. So the CIA formed a company called Air Sinai, and they flew the 4 trips pretending to be Egyptians flying into Israel. And I did that for 4 years.
That's also high risk.
That wasn't no that.
Well, technically, I mean, if they couldn't find anyone else to do it, and then
Well,
they
that
throw
was
you on the plane.
politically high risk. They call it politically high risk. I came back and flew for a while. Flew for an airline called Global International Airlines, and that was the first. I paid $2 million for a co-pilot seat. Now you're
What does
wondering,
that mean?
$2 million, $2 million cash for a co-pilot seat. And I said, yeah, that's how it worked. And what happened
You
was,
could, oh my, go
well,
ahead.
I was trying to get on with Global, and they were hiring captains and co-pilots, and I was, you know, overqualified for captain. They knew what my qualifications are, but when I sent in my resume, it was about a half an inch thick, and it really pissed off the chief pilot, and his name was Gam, and he said, I'm not one friggin' bit interested in how many airplanes you've flown, all I wanted to know was how much you've flown the 707, and how much time you've got, and on and on and on. I said, can I have the job? No. So I went home, and it turned out that the owner of this airline was a guy named Farhad Azima, very wealthy guy, Iranian, who had a get out of jail free card from the CIA, and he had one vice, and that was gambling, and he used to gamble at the Dunes Hotel. So I called up the casino manager at the Dunes Hotel, who I knew, and I said, hey, what's going on? He said, can I come down and talk to you? Yeah, sure, come on. So I went down there, and I said, I hear Farhad's gambling here. He says, yeah, he's here. And I said, well, I really need a job with this airline, and I'm stuck at the chief pilot. He does not like me, he doesn't want me, and I need the job. He said, okay, John, let me handle this. So he goes out, he comes back about 10 minutes later. He said, come on, I want you to meet Farhad. So I walked in the casino, and Farhad reaches out his hand and says, John, I'm Farhad Azima. I'm happy to have you as an employee for Global International Airlines. So we talked for a while, and then I went back to his office and said, how'd you do that? And he said, Farhad owes us $5 million, and we gave him $2 million off if he'd hire you.
But now you're in it for them. Now, you know, the dune says jump, and now you have to say how high. You have to fly their family and all their descendants till the end of time. Okay, only because we're running out of time, even though, you know, we could go for hours, but I don't want you to get too tired. So we've only got like 15 minutes. So I'm gonna start going with questions a little faster. The first thing I wanna know, and then I'm gonna let other people have asked questions, I'm gonna open it up to them.
Okay. Now wait.
Yeah, I really
And then I get the bratwurst.
It's all about the breakfast.
Flying past this bratwurst.
Exactly. That's why we didn't feed it to you before. All right. So you're called the Godfather of Conspiracies. Do you like that title?
Yeah, it fits.
Okay.
Because I've been at it, you know, longer than anybody else. I know practically every conspiracy story. Not everyone, but I know practically all of them. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
And do you think most of them are pretty much right on or close enough?
Absolutely. You know, I don't follow unless it's right on.
Yep. And did you have this fascination when you were younger?
No, I didn't even believe in flying saucers until 1985. You know.
And then what happened?
Then I was host to a banquet in Las Vegas every 2 years for those of us that flew in Southeast Asia for other companies, CIA, DIA, you know, NRO, and we meet together and talk about, you know, have fun, drink, and all the things we had. And I ran into a guy that I knew over in Laos who was a Raven, and the Ravens were sheep dip pilot, Air Force pilots taken out of the Air Force, given civilian ID, and then they'd fly in Laos against the North Vietnamese. So I'd seen him, and I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. His name was Greg Wilson. I said, where you been? He said, oh, you know, I flew A-10s, the Warthog, up in Bentwaters. And I said, Bentwaters, you mean the Air Force Station north of London? He said, yeah. And I said, well, that's supposedly where that flying saucer landed in 1980. He said, no, not supposedly, it did. Now, I didn't get to see it because I was kind of flying in quarters, but I know the guys who did, and they'll tell you it's all real. And I, you know, was shocked because I never had knew anything about flying saucers other than it was bullshit. And so I said, you mean it's real? And he said, yeah, it's real. And so that's what set me off into doing this flying saucer stuff. And of course, the next thing that came up was when Bill Moore, Jamie Chandra, and Stan Friedman came out with the Eisenhower briefing papers.
Yes.
And the thing was, did Majestic exist?
Right.
Majestic exists. And if I could find that, then I could prove that flying saucers are real. So unbeknownst to anybody else, You know, my family grew up at 222 14th Street in Santa Monica, California, just up the street from where General Jimmy Doolittle lived with his wife,
Yep.
Joe. And they were very good friends. Joe had passed away, and Jimmy had moved up to Monterey Bay, Carmel, and my mom kept in touch with him, and I knew that. So I knew if anybody would know anything about UFOs, it would be General Doolittle. So I talked her into, and it took me 6 months to get this going. I said, next time you talk to Jimmy, say, John, you know, I'm not sure whether John's doing the right thing, but he's getting mixed up in this stuff, and I need to know if Majestic was real. And she finally got around to it, called me and said, yeah. I said, what did he say? He said, yes, Moya, but I can't talk about it. So that was the one that set me off in another direction. This is true, so that must be true. So,
Right. All right, now this is kind of a heavy-duty question from somebody back east. Mr. Lear, when the Pentagon released the 3 alleged UFO videos from the Black Budget AATIP, Advanced Aerial Threat Program, to the New York Times, your analysis of the pilot's language was certainly not of military caliber, paraphrasing. Could you talk about that a little bit, and do you think the 3 videos called The Gimbal, Go Fast, and Flare are indeed UFOs, or possibly just our crafts?
I'd be happy to comment on that. It's all just like everything else the Pentagon puts out. It's pure bullshit. And you know, this stuff, they're delighted to have the public interested in something like that. Like, oh yeah, well we haven't known it, we haven't done anything for 70 years, and we'd sure like somebody to help us along with this. They have so much, you know. They have at least 70 saucers hidden away. They have at least 87 bodies of aliens that they have. We had communications with at least 7 different species of the group life. We have so much going on that they want to keep secret. And so what they do when they come along with some story like this bullshit AIPP or whatever it is,
Right.
that shows nothing on the radar screen, they're happy to say, yeah, that's ours, yeah, but it's all bullshit. So don't even pay any attention to that.
Okay, does anybody here have any questions? I should have asked that earlier, to have a question ahead of time. Well, then that's all right, because there's no lack of questions here. We had also spoke about, that the Pacific Ocean goes underneath this continent.
Yeah, the 7 western states of the United States sit on a shelf, and this shelf floats on the Pacific Ocean, so that you can go to any one of those states by going in an entrance. There's 2 entrances, one at Monterey Bay, at I think it's Coos Island, and the other at Malibu in California, and they have huge, big entrances that get into this underground sea, and you can go under these states. So just all you have to do is go to the website and put Malibu underwater entrance and Monterey Bay entrance, and you'll see where the Navy uses their nuclear submarines to go under the states, specifically to Hawthorne, Nevada. Now, you know, I flew when my folks lived in Reno. I would drive up there several times a month, and halfway between Las Vegas and Reno, there's a town called Hawthorne. And when you drive into Hawthorne, it's a little town, can't have more than several hundred people, has a lake that's 16 miles long, it's 100 feet deep, and when you go into town, there's a great big yellow or blue sign that says Naval Undersea Water Training Warfare Center. And I'm thinking, Warfare Center in a lake that's 100 feet deep? What are they talking about?
I've seen that sign.
And so it took me 30 years to find out what happened, but what they've done is they had found out that there was indeed the Pacific Ocean did underlie Nevada, and what they're trying to do is just northeast or just northwest of Hawthorne, inside that mountain, was a secret development facility that made all the secret Navy bombs and missiles and stuff that went on submarines. And what they did is, you know, they were stuck sending it out to the north. If they went up to Reno and then into San Francisco Bay, or driving it south through Las Vegas down to San Diego, until they found out that if they built an elevator, which was 40 feet in diameter, 3,400 feet underground, they could meet the Pacific, and then the submarine, nuclear submarine, could just come in at the Monterey Bay entrance or the Malibu entrance and end up under Hawthorne and get loaded there. And they had huge submarine bins that are right there. But you know, Hawthorne isn't the only place. They have submarine pens at other places. Ones at Sandspit up in Idaho, and ones at there in California, the Navy base down there, and there used to be one at Las Vegas. I'm not sure if that one's there anymore.
Yeah, okay, and then, I don't wanna go too deep on this, but what do you think about the current situation on the globe between COVID, the pandemic, the economy? Do you have any comments or not really?
I'll be honest, I don't know anything about that.
Okay, womp, 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 womp. And then the other thing is, do you wanna share the story of you and I in Walmart?
Is this something to do with bratwurst?
It has everything to do with bratwurst.
Yeah, go ahead, tell us the story. Do you have the picture?
I wouldn't show that picture
Oh,
for $1 million,
come on.
not for $1
You
million.
have it.
No, don't
Yeah,
do
right
it.
there.
That
I
is
gave to her.
blackmail. But this is the story. So the story is, he needed a little help. We figured Walmart's a lot of walking around. He had to pick up just a couple of things real quick. So we get him one of those scooter things. He gets in the scooter. We go inside. Bob's parked in the car. And he goes, Susan, you want to ride? I put my purse in the thing. I said, actually, I do want to ride. But then we left it like that. Then Bob comes in to Walmart. We're like, tooling around. He goes, no, Susan, get in the basket and take a picture. And, if it wasn't such a bad hair day and I looked 500 pounds, I would maybe share the
Hear
picture.
that for a minute. Oh, I look terrible. Let's just see the picture and I'll tell you.
Yeah. But anyways, I thought this is classic. John Lear's giving me a ride. Oh, sure, it's a Walmart cart, on a sunny day, but it still counts, right? It's too good. So, well, I thank you very much. We hardly even touched the surface on a whole bunch of stuff, but you got the bratwurst.
Thank you. I have to apologize. I keep forgetting your name.
Susan Morgan. Susan Morgan of
Susan
Mystic
Morgan.
Dream in Henderson, Nevada.
Okay.
So,
And now the bratwurst.
now the bratwurst, although also, let me say, so we have our neuroscientist, Marcelo Geffen, who met with him yesterday. Now, we'll see if, hopefully you'll still do this. Marcelo wants to do a brain scan of him and see what we can do for tweaking his brain. Like, he
That's
really
cool.
wants to check out his brain. So we may be doing that, I think even Tuesday or sometime this week.
That's cool.
And maybe we'll do a live Facebook. I'll keep everyone posted if that's the case. But I'm sorry I couldn't get to more questions for anyone that was asking, and maybe we'll do it again sometime because I can maybe bribe him with the bratwurst. So thank you very much. You did awesome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, that was so fun.
Yeah, that was